This is a work of fiction. Any names or characters, businesses or places, events or incidents are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. You are listening to
The Hale Academy, A Trip to the Kalunga, Chapter 1. Today would be a day like no other. My heart was full and my mind was firmly set. My course of action, though not fully formed, was clear, but first I had a job to do. I was the tour guide for the Hale Academy, the School of Sorcery and Other Magical Arts, so I prepared myself and set out to meet the expectant first years. Hi everyone, my name is Gabrielle Jones, I said in an inviting, preppy voice. They greeted me with a chorus of hellos. Welcome to the magical Hale Academy. Now please follow me. I turned to face the campus, then looked over my shoulder to catch a glimpse at their reactions to the beautiful scenery. Some of the students stood with mouths agape, staring at the gigantic main hall. Others stared wide-eyed at the waterfall flowing elegantly into the river on the right. Time for a brief history lesson, I said while turning to face the students once again. To your left is a beautiful waterfall. At night, the water will shine golden to signify that nature spirits are present. They are the founders of the Hale Academy. As I spoke, a part of me longed to be somewhere else. Anywhere else. Our school was founded in 1803 due to an event known to the mundane as the Ebo Landing. When captive Africans got off a slave ship near Savannah, Georgia, they took one look at the land and turned around. I paused for dramatic effect while walking a bit closer to the waterfall. Yep, that's right, they marched right back into the sea. To the onlookers, it appeared that they had drowned, but in reality, their actions formed the Finda, the spiritual domain where our academy rests. For years, I had given the same old spiel to the upcoming first years. The Hale Academy was spectacular. In the beginning, I was in awe of everything that the school had to offer. An exciting curriculum, the opportunity to discover my people's forgotten history, and a chance to connect with my ancestral spirits. All of this was amazing to me until one day, it wasn't. Water is a passageway to spiritual realms, so when they ventured into the water, they transformed into nature spirits, swearing to watch over African communities in the Americas for years to come. The nature spirits introduced magic to those communities and to the other Hale Academies throughout the Americas. Wow, this is so cool, one of the students in my group whispered. I smiled at them before taking a step away from the river. I pointed towards a small, white wooden cabin on the other side of the main hall. Just above the doorway, the words, Praise House, had been painted in black. And this is the Praise House. Praise houses were used as a form of spiritual sanctuary for our enslaved ancestors. Now we use them whenever we gather for communal meditation. As I guided the group through other parts of the campus, it seemed as if I was operating on autopilot. I didn't feel present. My thoughts were elsewhere. Right now, we're standing in what is called the House of the Elders. This lecture hall is where you'll learn all about the Hale Academies and the Finda's magical history. You'll encounter two other kinds of professors here. The herbalist, who'll teach you all about the magical sciences, including sacred medicine, and the artist, who teach my favorite courses about how through music, we learn to master and to manifest our powers. For what seemed like the 10th time, the first years let out whoas and wows. I wanted to roll my eyes at them, but I didn't. I maintained my facade and finished the tour. I had taken the students to every significant area on the campus. So, just as the Finda is the spiritual domain where all the Hale Academies lie, where the nature spirits watch over us, the Kalunga is where our ancestral spirits reside. They are ruled by the great ancestral spirit. Trips to the Kalunga are reserved for seniors like me. Seniors are granted this trip to meet the great ancestral spirit and to mark the end of our spiritual transformation. I am taking that trip today, I said with a prideful smile. My tour group erupted with congratulatory remarks. I thanked them with a delightful grin. But I was lying. I wasn't a senior. However, I had every intention of sneaking onto that senior trip today. Alright folks, that concludes our tour. Please go back to the admissions office to get the keys for your dorms. I hope you enjoy the journey that you're beginning at the Hale Academy. I stood in front of the main hall as the students headed inside. As I watched the last of them enter the building, I wiped the grin from my face. I rolled my eyes and let out a breath. I took out my phone, dialed a familiar number, and held the device to my ear. "Hey, where should I meet you?" "You know we're leaving soon, right?" A gruff male voice answered. I sucked my teeth. "Yeah, I know. Admissions gave me a last-minute tour, but I'm ready now, so where are you?" "I'm in my dorm, but I'm about to head out soon, so you better get here quickly." I sighed and placed my phone in my pocket. Chapter 2. Minutes later, I was knocking rapidly on a dorm room door. It swung open within seconds. "What took you so long?" the senior said in aggravation. He was wearing a fancy white tux and black dress shoes. "Look, I tried to get here as fast as I could. I'm sorry if I'm making you late for the ceremony, but you know how important this is to me," I pleaded with him. He rolled his eyes. "You mean how important this is to us? Your sister was my best friend, don't you remember?" I nodded as joyful memories of spending time with my older sister and her best friend filtered through my mind. "Yeah, I know, Daniel, and that's why we have to do this. We're going to figure out what happened to her." Daniel nodded his head before raising his hands and closing his eyes. "Okay, let's do this. Also, this might sting a little bit, but that's normal," he warned. I squinted, bracing myself for what was to come. But after moments of squinting and nothing else, I opened my eyes to examine my surroundings. I found Daniel staring at me with an amused expression. "I'm finished." "It really doesn't take long. Did you feel a sting?" he asked. I shook my head while holding my hands up to my face to examine them. "Check yourself out in the mirror," he advised. I turned towards the full-length mirror that was positioned in the corner of his dorm and gasped. As I examined my features, I discovered that I was not looking at my own reflection. In fact, I didn't see my features at all. Instead, I was staring at the spitting image of my older sister, Aliya Jones. Her skin was slightly darker than my own, and she had wide, doe-like eyes that accompanied her huge, kinky afro. I smiled in the mirror, and the corners of my sister's lips tugged upward the way that they always did when she greeted me. I watched as her eyes started to water in the mirror, and I felt a single tear travel down my cheek, her cheek. My school uniform that was once light red was now a pale white. "You did it! I look just like her!" I was stunned. He nodded as he stood behind me, taking in our reflections. "Yup, that's an incantation spell for you." He paused before heading toward the door. "All right, we gotta go. We're late." I nodded, moving to follow him. I wiped the tear from my face and walked out the door. We were both silent on our way to the campus waterfall. I'm not sure what Daniel had on his mind, but I was guessing that it was my sister. He kept sneaking glances at me. I knew his mind was occupied with memories of my joyful sister. They were very close friends before the incident. They entered the Hale Academy together, and they were supposed to graduate together. It had been months since my sister had vanished. Last school year, she disappeared after one of her missions, battling a malcontented spirit. Everyone else in her team had returned. During the weeks that followed her absence, the academy dispatched a few rescue teams tasked with finding my sister. But after a month, they stopped their search. They gave up. When 2 months passed, it seemed as if everyone had forgotten who she was. And the truth is that the students and faculty had actually forgotten. This is precisely when my love for the academy dwindled. I discovered that after the administration failed at recovering my sister, they proceeded to cover their tracks. One night, they hosted a large ceremony on campus for faculty and students. It was meant to honor and commemorate my sister after her disappearance. I decided not to go, choosing to grieve over my sister's absence in solitude, because the next day, he was the only one who could remember Aliya's name. Daniel and I think that they distributed an amnesia serum at the event, because when everyone returned, there was suddenly no mention of Aliya, and whenever either of us mentioned her to someone, they'd offer us confused and disturbed glances. I guess the administrators had to do something to get people to stop gossiping and whispering about her. My sister was widely known on campus, involved in clubs and sports. She was her class's student body president. She was a friend to all. My sister was not easily forgettable. While the rest of the academy moved on without her, Daniel and I were engulfed in our overwhelming grief. Such grief gave me the bandwidth to wear her appearance. I was going to find out what happened to her, and since no one would recognize me, I'd be able to pass as a senior without any complication. The plan was to travel with the seniors to the Kalunga and to confront the great ancestral spirit about how and where to find my sister. As we neared the large cluster of excited seniors standing on the edge of the river, I inhaled deeply as the idea of our plan sank further into my brain. Finally, I was going to do right by Aliya. I came to a stop just behind a senior wearing a long white dress. Daniel tapped her on her shoulder. "Where's the headmistress?" he asked anxiously, knowing that if the headmistress saw me, my cover might be blown. "Oh, you just missed her," the senior said with a gleeful smile. "Wait, what does that mean?" Daniel asked in confusion. The senior merely shrugged. "She just gave us a speech. She told us to go through the waterfall to get to the other side. Some people have already started walking through the waterfall, and they're saying that there's a boat that will take us to the Kalunga." Daniel nodded his head before grasping my hand. He tugged me toward the river. We weaved through the large cluster of students that stood on the riverside waiting. "Hey, slow down, what are you doing?" I exclaimed. "I think we should go through before the headmistress shows up again," Daniel said. "How do you know she'll show up again?" I asked with a raised eyebrow. "How do you know that she won't show up again?" he asked matter-of-factly. I shrugged. "Fair point. Okay, so now what?" We were at the edge of the water. After a moment of hesitation, Daniel took a step forward to walk into the shallow stream. I followed him. We continued to walk through the shallow water, our clothes magically staying dry. The river on the Hale Academy campus was special in more ways than one. During the daytime, it remained no more than 1 foot deep, and its waters never drenched clothing. But at night, not only did the water glow golden, but the river could reach depths of at least 20 feet. And by midnight, it would be filled with wise, often singing nature spirits, the Simbi, who offered protection to the students at night. Daniel shot me a nervous glance as we took small steps forward. "Don't worry, we got this." But the truth was that I was probably more nervous than he was. The more that I thought about our little plan, the more I doubted our success. Who did I think I was? If my sister had been the it girl on campus, I was not very far off. I definitely had fallen into her footsteps. I had loved the Hale Academy just as much as Aliya had. I was practically the spokesman for the institution since I worked as a tour guide. It wasn't like me to hold such disdain for the academy and this entire mission. Sneaking past and undermining the academy administration was not in my character. Nevertheless, all of my love for the school had practically been erased once my sister disappeared. I pursed my lips at the thought of having lost her. We finally made it to the front of the line, and as I took a step forward to walk through the waterfall, I felt a renewed sense of confidence about our end goal. Daniel and I were doing this for Aliya, and unlike our institution, we were going to find her and bring her home. When we reached the other side of the waterfall, we were surrounded by dark stone. The area was dimly lit by a few torches that were attached to the small cave-like walls. In the middle of the den, what looked like a submarine stood in the shallow water. "That's it," Daniel whispered. "That's how we're going to get there." "But that's not big enough to hold all of us," I said in confusion. "Yeah, there's more than one. One of my professors, Dr. Fatters, said that they need about 7 of those to get the entire senior class down here," someone explained. Daniel said, "I think we should get in this one. The sooner we get there, the better." I nodded in agreement. There was a handful of students waiting to board the submarine ahead of us. Nevertheless, it didn't take long for Daniel and me to climb aboard. "How long will the journey be?" I asked as I sat in my seat. The chairs were attached to the walls of the submarine with 10 seats on each wall, facing each other. There were no windows. "Probably a half hour," the senior who sat beside me spoke. "Wow, really?" someone across from me replied. "Yeah, Dr. Fatter said that the trip was pretty short," the senior from outside said again. After all these years of built anticipation about seeing the Kalunga, it's only 30 minutes away?" Another senior spoke up. All 20 of us were seated and strapped in now. I watched in amazement as the ship's doors automatically shut, and I felt its engine hum below us. I mean, if our ancestors are this close, why do we have to wait 5 years just to see them? Someone spoke, who was farther away from me and closer to the ship's door. I don't know. Maybe they don't save this trip for the seniors because of the distance. It's likely because of our maturity, the senior who sat beside me said. There was a momentary silence in the submarine. The ship began to move, and I was one step closer to finding Aliya. "Maybe you're right. Finally being able to wear white on campus is really cool, a voice across from me said. At the sound of the senior uniform color, my heart leaped. The seniors continued to speak amongst themselves as I fell into deep thought about one of the many things that used to excite me about the Hale Academy. The meaning of the different school uniforms and the anticipation and excitement of one day being able to wear white on campus grounds. The first years and sophomores wore black to represent their spiritual immaturity. Juniors wore different shades of red to signify their spiritual growth. And finally, the seniors wore white as they arrived at full celestial maturity. For so long, I had dreamed of wearing those white uniforms. It was such an honor. Part of me still yearned for that accomplishment. Time passed relatively fast because soon our ship came to a halt. An automatic voice suddenly filtered through surround sound speakers that I was unaware the vehicle had. "Welcome, seniors, to the Kalunga," the mechanical voice spoke. The 20 of us looked around curiously. Some of us unbuckled our seatbelts. To the right of the exit, you'll find a small cabin with snorkeling fins that will help you get around once you enter the city. You will also find aquatic inhalers, which you are to place upon your entire face. These will help you breathe and see underwater for your entire stay here. The doors will open automatically in 10 minutes. Please make sure your fins and inhalers are in place. And be ready to greet your gracious host on the other side of the ship's doors. Enjoy your stay. The mechanical voice finished speaking. Chapter 3. I was the first to stand up and head towards the cabin to get the aforementioned items. Daniel followed quickly. We were both eager to start enacting our plan. Soon, everyone had put on their fins and inhalers just as the submarine's doors slowly started to open. The sight before us was magical. I nearly gasped at the person who smiled back at us. He had dark brown skin that adorned his body from the waist up. His hair was short and styled in small, curly coils. He wore a black vest that fell gently above his bare chest. But I found myself in utter shock as I looked at something that I had never seen before. Unlike the nature spirits who swam freely about in the campus's river with their mermaid-like tails, this man had elegant black tentacles that gently fluttered and wiggled freely beneath him. Whoa! I assumed that I was not the only one who stared at him in astonishment because he eventually cleared his throat and said, "Yep, that's right. Ancestral spirits in the Kalunga have tentacles instead of the tails that you may be more used to. We are designed in the image of our mother, the great ancestral spirit who you will soon meet after I quickly guide you through the city." He paused. "Where are my manners? My name is Tyrese, and it is so nice to meet you all. Congratulations on starting your senior year at one of the prestigious Hale Academies." A chorus of respectful bows and thank yous came from the students standing in the ship. "Now that we're done with the formalities, allow me to show you my home," Tyrese said while raising one of his hands and moving his tentacles gracefully so that he was no longer blocking our view of the large, bustling city that awaited us. Eventually, we were in the middle of the fast-paced underwater town, with Tyrese graciously leading us. The entire Kalunga is made of enormous clamshells and other large shells known as mbamba. Tyrese moved until we were all floating beside one of the largest buildings in the middle of the city. By this point, we had already covered a great deal of the city's landscape. We'd explored the busy sidewalks accompanied by majestic ancestral spirits that looked just like Tyrese with their long and agile-looking tentacles. We ventured into several food taverns and we'd toured a small apartment complex on the city's edge where some spirits rested. Their rooms were much like apartments above the surface, except that these accommodated the spirits in their tentacles. We joined Tyrese on top of a large but very gentle humpback well as we traveled between destinations. When I sat on the well, I watched in amazement at the other spirits traveling beside us in smaller groups atop lemon sharks. Daniel was equally amazed. We both nearly forgot about our plan while taking in the glorious underwater kingdom that was the Kalunga. My thoughts drifted back to the present. "And if you look very closely at the large shells that make up the building," Tyrese stated, as we floated beside the large building, "you will see the golden bioluminescence aligned in a pattern on the shell's surface. This is why the entire city glows a shimmering gold. These patterns of light are just about everywhere in the Kalunga," Tyrese continued confidently. Wow, I whispered. The Kalunga had easily exceeded my expectations. I couldn't have imagined that it would look like this, even as I had yearned to come here since I was a first year. I inhaled deeply, regaining focus, remembering why I had joined this senior trip in the first place. Aliya. I started to feel guilty. I was supposed to be avenging my sister, and here I was getting consumed by this tour. I shook my head to snap out of my excitement for the ancestral town. Alright everyone, that concludes your guide of the Kalunga. Now's the moment that you've all been waiting for, Tyrese said with a grin. I heard a few seniors gasp beside me, while others clapped their fingers together. I held my head high, anticipating his next words. It is now time for you to meet the great ancestral spirit, the old one, Mother Thuluk. Please follow me, Tyrese said while moving back towards our transportation, the large humpback well. As we all climbed aboard the well, I shot Daniel a tense glance. He nodded to reassure me. I nodded back. We were telling each other that there was no turning back now. Eventually, we arrived at a grand amphitheater in a large park. Several underwater trees surrounded it. I was sure that mbamba shells had been used in the construction of the theater. Tyrese quickly got off of the well and gestured for us to follow him to the entrance of the amphitheater. All right, everyone, this is where I leave you, he said with a gracious smile before waving goodbye. You may enter whenever you are ready, but it was certainly nice to meet you all. And with that, Tyrese turned away, moving to climb on top of his whale. All of us watched as he left before we nervously glanced back at the entryway. Who wants to go first? Someone spoke, filling the empty silence. I clasped my fingers together and prepared myself to say, I will. But before I could say anything, the same senior who had sat beside me in the submarine said, Let's all go together. For a moment I was beside myself before I noticed that everyone else, including Daniel, nodded their heads in agreement. Although I wanted to bravely march inside the theater to confront the great ancestral spirit with questions about Aliya, I had to remember that this trip was not just about me. I looked around at the nervous seniors who floated beside me, recalling that this was a sacred trip for them. Even though I was not the biggest fan of the academy at the moment, my disdain for the school did not blind me to the fact that I needed to honor how significant this moment was for the seniors, including Daniel. So, we all swam into the amphitheater together. Chapter 4. There she was, Mother Thuluk. She was alone, but she appeared to be preoccupied, retwisting her own brown locks that fell elegantly down her waist. Her eyes were closed, showing her long eyelashes as she hummed softly to herself. Her melodic voice echoed throughout the large amphitheater. Tyrese's phrase about being made in the old one's image entered my mind as I stared at her set of beautiful black tentacles. I watched in awe as her lips seemed to tug into a smile. Suddenly her eyes fluttered open as she focused on us while we slowly shuffled into the arena. She raised her eyebrows in excitement as she moved her hands away from her hair. She swung her hair over her shoulders and turned to us. All of this movement caused huge ripples in the seawater. Her hair was about 8 feet long and she practically was a giant. She was possibly 6 feet tall, but it was hard to tell while she was sitting. Greetings, my children, she offered with a welcoming smile. Her voice was soothing like that of a caring mother. Oh, how I've longed to meet you all. Please, come closer. When we reached her, we all instinctively laid gently on her tentacles, as if we were young children lying on the laps of their elders. I did not think twice about it as I sat casually at the end of her tentacles. For some reason, she felt so familiar. As I gazed up at the old one, I felt safe and protected. Mother Thuluk did not shoo us off. She seemed unfazed by our reactions to her presence. I hope you all enjoyed your visit to the Kalunga so far, she said kindly. We nodded our heads, all of us too intimidated to speak. Well, as seniors, you have reached a special point in your academic careers and are a step closer towards spiritual enlightenment. However, although it joys me to meet all of my children, I believe that one of you was not meant to be here today. My heart stopped as I watched her wide golden orbs focus on my own. I noticed Daniel fidgeting beside me from the corner of my eye. Miss Gabrielle Jones, She spoke directly to me, her smile never leaving her face. "You have used quite the enchantment spell to get here, huh?" She turned her attention to Daniel. "Now, this is commendable work, Mr. Daniel, but would either of you mind telling me why you used it so that Gabrielle could visit me today?" I sucked in a breath, shooting a glance at Daniel, who sat speechless, staring up at the goddess. I came here to search for answers about my sister," I said meekly. Mother Thuluk nodded her head while gesturing for me to continue with my explanation. "Her name is Aliya Jones, and she went missing last semester when my academy sent her out on a missionary trip. But the thing is that everyone who was on her team returned safely from the mission except for her. Weeks went by and no one was able to find her, and I started to really get scared and kind of depressed too. We both did," I said, gesturing to Aliya's best friend. "Right around this time, people around campus just started to forget about my sister. Whenever I tried to ask anyone about her, everyone acted as if I had lost my mind. Everyone except Daniel. And I think that's when we realized that the administrators had slipped some kind of amnesia serum in the drinks at a campus event that was meant to commemorate my sister. Since we weren't there, we're the only ones who can remember her." I looked down while rubbing my hands together nervously. It's been months since I last saw my sister. "So Daniel and I plan on coming here to speak to you so that you can help us find her. People know who I am and that I'm only a third year. He used this enchantment on me so that I could pass as a senior. I just need to find my sister, Mother Thuluk. Will you please help us?" I pleaded. But the great ancestral spirit only looked at me with an amused expression on her face. She even started to let out a light chuckle, which confused me. "How brave of you, Gabrielle, to come all this way to see about your sister. I commend you for your tenacity. Oh, and I can definitely take you to your sister." My heart started to pound rapidly at the sound of her words. "Really?" I said. Daniel perked up beside me. The old one nodded her head and her long locks gently floated behind her. She moved her head until it was directly in front of me. She winked at me as if she were telling me to climb into her palm. I squinted my eyes, but I didn't ask questions. I crawled into her hand. Once I was floating securely in her palm, she brought me closer to her face. Her shimmering eyes were more intimidating up close. "Now, you will have to go to her without me, for I must stay with my children here. These seniors have a right to my time with them. However, when you see your sister, she'll have a lot to explain to you. So I'm sure that you probably won't want to spend time explaining to her why you look just like her." With the blink of her eyes, I felt a sharp sting flood my body. Without even having access to a mirror, I already knew that she had removed Daniel's incantation. "Now you're all set. Say hi to your sister for me," Mother Thuluk said before softly blowing water in my direction. The wave of water was strong enough to pick me up and take me with it. I had no choice but to fall limp to the underwater current that moved me away from the amphitheater and closer towards the outskirts of the Kalunga. I sucked in a breath, unsure of where the old one's waves were taking me. I floated on top of several buildings before finally stopping above a small dome-like structure. I regained my balance before swimming towards the building. There was a set of doors on one side of the building. The other side was on the edge of a cliff, and there was no wall. The interior was completely exposed. I swam towards the side of the building. As I moved closer, I heard an ear-piercing scream, followed by loud wailing. I stopped in my tracks just above the building's roof. I determined that the sobbing was coming from just beneath me, where the inside of the building was exposed. Between the loud cries, I heard a familiar voice. My eyes began to water. Chapter 5. "Please, try calming down and trust me. It will all be fine." Aliya's calm voice filtered through the seawater. I clasped my hand over my heart as I realized that I had finally executed my plan. I had found my sister. I floated above the building, frozen, so shocked to have her back, and as I stayed there motionless, I listened to the conversation below me. In between broken sobs, a woman replied to Aliya, "But I don't understand how this could have happened. How could they all just forget about me?" The woman let out another scream before continuing to cry.
Miss Dansby, you'll have to trust me on this, but this is actually normal, Aliya said. But how? I've heard stories about what happens when we're forgotten in the land of the living, but I just never thought my time would come so soon, Miss Dansby sniffled. Oh, but this is a wonderful time for you, Miss Dansby, Aliya replied. How wonderful can this be when it's only happening because all my family forgot about me up there? Now my life is ending, Miss Dansby retorted. Miss Dansby, you have served well during your time in the ancestral realm as an Insala. But your journey has ended. The transformation from Insala to Simbi is a sacred one. I promise that you'll love it. I've met a few Simbi before I came down here. Those nature spirits live wonderful lives closer to the surface. Similar to how you've watched over your loved ones from down here, you'll be able to watch over our entire people. Up there, Aliya said. I had remained immobile during their conversation. Finally, I moved to peer over the roof to look inside. Aliya floated while giving Miss Dansby a hug. Unlike the other ancestral spirits that I've seen, Miss Dansby's tentacles felt depressingly below her in a straight line. So, in a way, Miss Dansby began to perk up. I'll be making more of a difference up there than I ever did down here. Aliya chuckled. Well, yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. Insala are ancestral spirits who can only watch over their direct kin in the Kalunga. But once you transform into a Simbi, at the surface, you'll be able to guide all of our people in the land of the living. So, it's like a promotion, Miss Dansby said with a smile. Her tears had vanished. Aliya grinned. Yeah, kind of. Miss Dansby jolted away from Aliya, heading out of the building towards the cliff's edge. Well, in that case, count me in. I can't wait for this transformation. Aliya laughed. Well, I'm happy to hear that. We'll begin the ceremony if you're ready. Oh, I'm ready. Let's do this, Miss Dansby said while swirling around at the cliff. Aliya nodded while holding her palms face up. She then hummed a soft, familiar tune. I widened my eyes once I recognized that this was the same tune that Mother Thuluk had sung when she was retwisting her hair. As Aliya continued to hum, Miss Dansby's tentacles started to twist together gracefully. A blinding yellow light began to form beyond the cliff's edge. I watched in bewilderment as Miss Dansby's tentacles swirled and twirled together until they eventually formed a mermaid-like tail. I gasped at the sight of this. Oh, she squealed, staring at her new Simbi tail in admiration. I can't believe it. Aliya stared at her with a soft grin. Miss Gloria Dansby, you are no longer an Insala. You are a Simbi. Now you may swim towards the light. Aliya pointed at the glowing yellow beam. The reborn Miss Dansby followed her instructions precisely. As soon as she swam towards the yellow light, she disappeared and the light vanished. Whoa, I whispered to myself. You can come out now, I heard my sister call out to me. I know you're there, Gabrielle, Aliya said with a smirk. Startled, I slowly swam down to where she was floating. But how did you know? She shrugged. Just call it my older sister intuition. I squinted my eyes before engulfing her in a hug. That's not even a real thing, she said, laughing while hugging me tightly. I've missed you, sis. I pulled back from her hug and frowned. You missed me? You're one to talk. You have no idea how I felt these past months. You know that the Academy basically made everyone forget about you? I started to speak rapidly, feeling the heat of the blood in my veins. But all Aliya did was nod her head as if she already knew everything that I was telling her. I squinted my eyes at her. What's going on? I guess I have some explaining to do. She shuffled her snorkel fin-covered feet. After my missionary trip, when I defeated a malcontented spirit, I caught Mother Thuluk's attention. When my teammates were sent back to the academy, I was sent to meet Mother Thuluk. Wait, what? Why? I questioned. When I got there, she said that she had never heard of a third year with such an advanced magical skill set. Mother Thuluk said that because of my outstanding performance, she would give me an early graduation. Now I am one of her first living apprentices in over a century. I widened my eyes, unsure of how to process this information. What does that mean? Well, first of all, my job as her apprentice is top secret. No one in the land of the living can know. That's why the academy did what they did. I let out a sigh of relief, and I felt my pent-up rage for the academy dissolve. Now I knew that they hadn't erased my sister from everyone's memory just to cover up their tracks. And secondly, as her apprentice,
I have been assisting with 2 ceremonies in the Kalunga, the rebirth ceremony and the departure ceremony that you just witnessed. I held back my desire to bombard her with questions. During the rebirth ceremony, I am to usher the recently deceased into the Kalunga. Once they are able to cross these waters, they become ancestors, the Insala. The Insala will remain in the Kalunga until their living relatives and friends no longer remember them. When the ancestral spirits are forgotten, through the departure ceremony, they will become more distant spirits, nature spirits. They'll be just like the Simbi in the river next to the campus. So that's what I've been doing this whole time, Gabby, Aliya said softly. Wow, Aliya, that's amazing. You have to know how proud I am of you. And I'm not even surprised, because if anyone deserves an honor like this, it's you. You're an amazing mage. It's just, my voice faltered. That I kept this secret from you, Aliya finished my sentence. I really am sorry that I had to wait so long to tell you, Gabrielle. Wait, what do you mean you had to wait to tell me? I was the one who found you. A small smile began to tug at Aliya's lips. Well, I was actually expecting you to visit me today. Remember when I said I had an older sister's intuition? I frowned and laughed. What do you mean? I mean that I work for the all-powerful and all-knowing Mother Thulug. She knew that you planned on sneaking down here before you even thought of it yourself, Aliya replied. Wait, really? She knew what I was going to do this whole time? Yeah. Aliya nudged me slightly. She is the great ancestral spirit, and she even told me that you planned this with Daniel. You definitely have to take me to him. Also, you need to get back to the others before they head out, Aliya said. Wait, but when will I get to see you again? I said seriously. I asked Mother Thulug about allowing you and Daniel to visit me down here every once in a while. It'll have to be top secret, but she thinks it's possible. I smiled at her. All of the frustration that had filtered throughout my body, the need to find my sister, my disdain for the academy was gone. Alright, now let's get you back to the rest of the group, Aliya laughed. I smiled as we both hugged each other tightly.